Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, March 10th, 2023, going up on a Saturday. So this is my first AM reading video of the month, and as is such, I will start by kind of wrapping up all of my February reading. Not so much by talking about it, but by leaving links to where I talked about it before. I have my literary newsletter up, which I'll link down below. It has snippets of all the Goodreads reviews of the books that I've read in February. I have bookish news that caught my fancy, a book pick, favorite book quote, all that good stuff. And I also wrapped up talking about the two Israeli short story collections in a video that I'll link below. I didn't talk about especially one of the collections that much in my AM reading videos, but I, did a little comparison, contrast, and that sort of stuff in this video. Kind of short for me too. Less rambling. Not sure if I'll be rambling less here or not. This is my, first AM reading video, but feels like I haven't read as much as I might have hoped to by this point in March, but I guess I'm doing okay. Just trundling along and enjoying my reading so far. So the first thing I'll do is stick with my custom of reviewing a short story to start off these AM reading videos. And right now I'm in the middle of this collection, Oy Caramba, an anthology of Jewish stories from Latin America, edited by Ilan Stavins. And the story I read this week is called Temptation by Salomon Briansky. I'm thinking this is somewhat autobiographical in a way. Briansky was a Jewish immigrant from Poland who arrived in Colombia in 1934. And his main character, Reb Nathan, is a Hasidic man who goes to Colombia sometime from Poland. I'm assuming maybe, I guess in my head I was thinking 1934 and kind of keeping it in the back of my head that a decade later almost all of the Jews who remained in Poland would have been murdered. That was something in the back of my head as I was reading this anyway, but this story is a little bit more of a morality tale. It's about Reb Nathan. He's a shoemaker going to a foreign land where there are almost no Jews, and he decides to pay significant money to bring a Torah along with him for the purposes of administering to the growing, if still tiny, Jewish community in Colombia. And it's a little bit of risk, I mean a financial one, because it's so much money, and one of the major things I was realizing is maybe he could have taken his wife and child along with him immediately, or at the very least, had a little bit more of a nest egg, and it was a little bit of an anxiety producer at the time when he brought it. And anyway, then he gets set up in Colombia as a shoemaker. He does meet two other Jews. They're both peddlers. And this is just, stunning to him. He comes from a shtetl life, like a settled life in Poland. Very much grounded in community, and meanwhile these other two Jews are, transient in a way, and he settles down in a shop, and the example the author gives of him kind of going off, I guess the derrick in a way, going off of the traditional path, is that, some Catholic Colombian women start to use his services, and of course that means he has to touch them in order to give them shoes, and I think it's implied, the whole idea, that Hasidic men would not touch women in normal circumstances, and he'd also of course be bolstered by a community of his own, and here he only has these women, and there's a little bit of, I wish the author had backed away a little bit of his dark-skinned women commentary, like of saying, this is somewhat of a temptation of him being outside of his community and doing something that would, take him away from God. I wish he'd, obviously, there's some sexist and racial biases there, where I can understand, you know, the fears of losing community, the fears of assimilation, but, you know, anyway. And then after, you know, he starts administering to these women, he's literally visited by the devil. And this is also around the time of the High Holy Days. And, you know, it's a big thing that, you know, maybe Nathan and the scant Jews wouldn't be able to celebrate the High Holidays without, you know, a community. And so the devil's just kind of tempting him, I think, to ignore it because it's just so difficult, you know, to do. But then, meanwhile, some of the Jews do find him to talk to him about buying his Torah. It ends, though, with him, you know, giving it up for free. And I think the message being, you know, that the money part of it, you know, it's, you know, this sort of almost defaming or, you know, this holy task of bringing a Torah to serve the people. And that, you know, I think Rev Nathan's load is lifted by giving it up, like, in, you know, in freely, like with, you know, with spiritual ardor to the slowly growing Jewish community. And that's sort of an end to some of his troubles, I think, and finally being able to bring a consolidated sense of Jewish community in Colombia, because we use the Torah then to read for the high holidays, which, you know, that at least is a start, and for, you know, the most some of the most important Jewish holidays to boot. So yeah, that's the tale. It's kind of you know, a short and sweet morality tale about you know, coming to a strange land and resisting assimilation, I think, is sort of you know, a nice takeaway from that, and to, you know, keep a community, especially when I'm realizing, I'm not sure when the author wrote this, but I'm of course realizing that the community is about to be destroyed in the old homeland. The first book I read and finished this month is The Waking Land by Callie Bates. This one's kind of exciting. I've had it on my physical TBR shelves for several years now. I got it for free from the publisher, Penguin Random House, Del Rey Books, while they were at San Diego Comic-Con in 2018, which was the last time I was there. And like, I went around all of the, you know, publishing tables and probably brought back way too many books. And then this one has been on my shelves for way too long. And I finally got it off of my shelves through my latest page 112 tag game, where I pull out 3 random titles from those shelves and read page 112 on camera, and then pick the one I think is the best written, hopefully. I'll link that video down below. I did it early this month. It's very unusual, I think, for me to start the month with a page 112 tag book, but I did it because you know, this is a fantasy book, and I was thinking it would be fun to read a fantasy novel while critiquing the beta reading chapters of my science fiction and fantasy beta reading group. So we've already met. I guess our time frame is moving earlier in the month, so who knows, maybe I'll be starting more months off with fantasy and science fiction books. So anyway, this was an enjoyable book. I think it started out stronger than it ended, but I really liked it. This is a book with the main character. Her name is Lady Ilana, or Elle. It's a secondary world fantasy, but it's very much based off of aspects of Irish mythology and the Roman conquest, I believe. Although I'm getting most of that from Kirkus reviews, and I'm kind of shocked how dismissive they were of this book, and they were like saying, well, everybody will be so distracted by her real-world inspiration of with Ireland. And I'm like, first of all, maybe I'm uncultured, but I didn't get much of that. And second of all, I don't really care if she's inspired by the real world. That doesn't distract me. What I was impressed by was how complicated, like, the political and cultural world building was. So like Alana, when she was 5 years old, she's taken from her father. Her father is a duke in the land called Caris, which is like an unsteady country, kingdom with the land of Aren. And her father, the duke, wants to bring back like a king who is living like across the waters, like in an empire called Paladis. And he wants to bring back this king to usurp the king who was recently crowned, and he's found out. And since he's so popular, the new king decides, well, I'm going to take your daughter as a hostage and you know, rather than kill you and, you know, maybe start a rebellion that way, but your daughter's going to be my hostage, you know, for your good behavior going forward. So that's what happens in a prologue when Elle is 5, but then 14 years later, she's grown up in Erin in the capital city, and has a pretty decent life there, and has like kind of absorbed all of the southern teachings about Karis being backwards and superstitious and trying to, you know, break up a country that's, you know, doing well, doing fine on its, you know, being unified like this, and it's not about, oppressing that group over there. And there's other things going on too. Like she thinks like she's really grown to like this king who's like a father figure to her. But meanwhile, in the background, you know, there's rumors about the reality that he's stiffing the poor and using their tax money basically to build lavish, you know, accoutrements to his castle rather than, say, you know, public service works. So there's already some growing unrest, and then the king dies mysteriously, and she is blamed pretty much immediately, and the king's true daughter becomes the queen, and that character, Lois, is kind of a one-dimensional sort of villain, and she and her lover Dennis are kind of one-dimensional in that way, and so Elle wants to flee to the empire that has, I guess, relations with the kingdom of Erin. I don't think they're a vassal state exactly, but this empire of and Pallidus is kind of like the big cheese. And she wants to flee there. She doesn't want to go to Karis, where, you know, now she has all these sort of negative memories and propaganda in her head about being abandoned and also the place being backward. She also has magic. And both in Erin and Pallidus, magic is considered to be, you know, taboo, but, you know, it's tied up in Karis superstitions, and so she's been trying to squelch it, and it's like a nature-based magic where she can make things grow, so she's a botanist, but anyway, her father's men come to ferry her home, which of course does not, you know, look good in terms of her being innocent, but she kind of runs out of options and has to go with them, and is brought back to her ancestral home for the first time in 14 years. And of course, during the course of that, you know, learning from her father's men and from her family, you know, she kind of comes to terms with the fact that she's been lied to. The story she's been told about the unification of Erin and Karis aren't so simple. It's like, oh, Erin peacefully conquered them, and no, it wasn't like that at all. And as she comes into her, you know, ancestral homeland, you know, her magic starts waking up more, and so, you know, it's harder to, you know, just knock it off as a superstition when it's really a part of her, and she's finally sort of owning up to it. That's really the part of the story that's a Bildungsroman of a 19-year-old, something that, you know, seems very explicitly YA category. Although I think this book is marketed as adult. I think the world building is complicated. We also get into Karis's schisms, like, you know, between the lowlanders and the highlanders, the lowlanders bending the knee to Erin and the highlanders not doing so, and the highlanders have, like, you know, some of their magic trees left and that sort of thing. And anyway, you know, the story's going on, and first unwittingly and then more and more wittingly, Elle becomes, you know, a leader of this rebellion, especially since her specific powers mean she is a significant figure within ruling Karis. Like, she has this nature power, and it makes her, you know, significant. It's the first time in like 200 years I think anyone's had this power. And meanwhile, they're trying to bring this king and his son, well, his son is already there from growing up in exile in Pallidus. So there's all these sorts of, you know, I think interesting political schisms about, like, oh, are they going to accept these foreigners basically to rule them, and will they even, you know, succeed against Lois's army, and Dennis, who is, you know, taken over the dukedom once, I guess, Elle's father is, taken prisoner. So anyway, I think there's a lot of complicated and intriguing world building. I don't care how much people might or might not see reality in that. I feel like reality is a wonderful inspirational tool for creating fantasy worlds. That's what I'm doing with my own fantasy world for the book I'm writing. So anyway, But where I feel like the book kind of fell apart is that it was so breakneck by terms of plot and world building that I felt like the character stuff was too shallow. I kind of wished that that Lois and Dennis were a little more complicated than just straight up evil or something like that, or at least that we'd have more time with Elle and Aaron to sort of you know, build up real relationships she had with these people, and then it would be more complicated for her to break them and to learn new ways in her ancestral homeland, and more time with her really dealing with her parents and how they abandoned her and what that meant for her, you know, emotionally. I know it would have, you know, this book is already pretty long, and I guess I'm like in the George R.R. Martin camp in a way. I was thinking a lot about him here. You know, we have somebody being taken as a hostage ward like Theon Greyjoy, or, you know, the holy trees being torn down like in the South, kind of like in Westeros. And what I like with George R.R. Martin is like he goes from different POV to different POV, and it really hammers home the point that this is a complicated world where it's not black hats versus white hats. Although I guess technically in this story maybe it's supposed to be. It really is about a civil war where an oppressed people is, you know, sort of reuniting with their magic and with their country and that sort of thing. But I feel like, you know, it's still, I mean, and I feel like the politics of it are still pretty complicated, or the ethnic groups, but I don't think there was enough room for Elle's relationships really to be three-dimensional, even with her lover Jahan, or maybe with him it was more okay. Spoiler alert, I think he's going to be the main character of the second book, so we won't be deepening Elle's character as a protagonist, but I think we'll be expanding the world because he'll go back to Pallidus and we'll learn more about the seat of the Empire. Yeah, I just wish there was a little more like emotional heft to it ultimately, so I was a little disappointed by that by the end, but I still thought it was a really strong book. And now I am reading The Dead of Tamar by Nicole Dweck. This is a novel that's been on my Goodreads TBR for enough years that it's now at my top of the Goodreads resolution of the books that I cordoned off for myself at the beginning of the year that I wanted to finally get to and read this year. So here we have it. This is a historical fiction novel. Well, first I might take a step back again and say I believe this novel was originally independently published, but then it did so well that it was picked up by a traditional publisher. Yes, this is Thomas Dunn Books, St. Martin's Press, so that's pretty awesome. But anyway, getting back to the review part, this is historical fiction. It starts in the 16th century. We are in Spain, and we start with this woman, Donna Antonia, and her family. They have an audience with the Queen. The Queen is trying to marry off Donna Antonia's daughter to one of her family members, which seems like a great match, you know, and the daughter Reina seems thrilled with it, and the male head of the family, Donna Antonia's nephew Jose, seems thrilled with it, but Donna Antonia has this big reputation of being pursued by suitors, you know, well-off suitors for her beautiful daughter, and she turns all of them down. And it's just kind of seen as a big paranoid thing or something. And this seems like a last straw, like how do you say no to the Queen, who basically gives her a 2-month ultimatum. But Donna Antonia is still continuing to defer. Anyway, on their way home, they come across the Inquisition, basically, the burning of Jews in the street, which is the first time Jose has seen anything like this, and he's just scandalized by, you know, the naked human violence of it, and these, you know, violent deaths. And he drags his aunt out, who is actually a very well-off, you know, woman. I guess part of the reason why she's being pursued by all these well-off suitors for her daughter. And he tries to drag her out to stop this, because he thinks she has the power to do so. And while she's resisting him, she lets him into the big family secret that they, like all of these condemned people, are secret Jews, basically. Because by this point, in Spanish history, the 1492 edict has already happened, so that the Jews either had to, you know, leave or convert. And so they're burning the, you know, the converted Jews who, you know, were forced to convert and secretly practiced Judaism. They're known as conversos, although I think the name Anusim is becoming much more in fashion now, and that's the way it is in this book as well. And so the major reason Dona Antonia doesn't want to marry her daughter off to all these other people is, I guess, her hope that she can keep their traditions alive and marry the daughter off within their, you know, private, you know, community. But by this point, it's like it's too suspicious, and she knows they're at the end of the line. So it kind of feels like she might have broken the news of their secret heritage to Reina and Jose a little earlier, because basically now they have an ultimatum that, you know, either they'll have to say yes to the queen or they'll have to flee within 2 months. And so that's what they decide to do. And part of that has to do with the fact that Dona Antonia is actually a major part of the underground, and she's been ferrying a lot of her wealth off to help, you know, an underground to, you know, ferry secret Jews out of Spain and Portugal. And so they do ultimately flee. Jose, meanwhile, has been learning a lot about Judaism from a secret teacher. Within a month or so, his own parents were murdered for being secret Jews when he was a baby. And at that time, I think Dona Antonia basically became Jose's ward, and that's why he was spared. Or not, you know, taken to, you know, another Christian family. So anyway, this is more or less where I am. Well, actually not exactly. They go with a group of people they identify as gypsies, I suppose one of the Roma tribe. That's how they're able to sort of walk out of Spain, as it were, and they ultimately end up in Istanbul. And this is a lot of commentary on how at the time in medieval Spain and Portugal, the Sephardi Jews of Spain and Portugal found refuge in the Ottoman Empire, and that the sultans, most of them, really advertised themselves as being a place where Jews could practice openly and not live in fear of persecution. And so that's where, at the time, a lot of Jews were trying to head to, and that's where Dona Antonia and her family had, they call it Istanbul, which I thought was a little early to call it that, although I was doing a little bit of research and I thought, well, maybe, it looks like, yeah, maybe they called it Istanbul from a longer ago time than it became the official name of the city. But anyway, that's just a tangent. So yeah, that's more or less where I am now. They're starting to settle down in Istanbul, but weirdly enough, I feel like this is a relatively short book, and it's not a book that's going to stay in this one period of time. It's going to go well into the future, into basically the modern day, where we look at the the descendants, as it were, of these people, and perhaps some other people who descended from the Ottoman Empire. So, I don't know, I'm hoping it's not going to be too fleeting in a way, because this feels like it's such a short book for that. I feel like it's going to reference probably a lot of the history in between this time period and the 21st century, but I don't think they'd have enough time to really get into it. It's way too short, but you know, the cover copy's teasing it, like, about all this stuff that might happen in between. But I'm just hoping, you know, Dweck doesn't, I guess, get us too lost in plot, and that the characters are too fleeting to, you know, latch onto. But so far I'm interested enough in these three characters, in Jose and Reina and Dona Antonia, and what they're dealing with and the history of it, and I'm hoping, you know, we'll get to flesh them out too more individually in Istanbul. So stay tuned. I will wrap up talking about this book next week. And finally, speaking of persecution of the Jews, and again returning to Poland, on audio I am listening to Escape from Auschwitz by Johnathan Freedland. So anyway, this is a biography of the man Rudolf Verba, who is one of just a small handful, and technically, I guess, the first, or one of the two first Jewish men to break out of the Auschwitz concentration camp in the 1940s with the intent of telling the world and warning the world of the reality of the final solution and the mass murder of the majority of the Jews who ended up there. And that is all I will say about this book right now, because I am reading it for the BookTube Prize. The BookTube Prize was started by Robert at Barter Hordes. It's for the bookish literary community to judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published the year before in the US. So we are right now in the first round, the octafinals round, where we're reading 48 books per division, and I am, of course, reading as a judge for the nonfiction division for Group H. So I have this book and 6 others that I am reading and pitting against each other, and I have to submit my ballot at the end of this month. And then in the next round, our long list will be halved, and we'll continue going forward until we get to some winners in October. But anyway, as I am reading as an official judge, I'm zipping my lips and keeping mum about what I think about these books, not wanting to influence anybody, my fellow judges especially. But I will link down below to more information about the BookTube Prize, and I also did a video last month of my preliminary thoughts before I started reading these books. So check it out below. So that about covers it for me now. It's been a pretty busy and writer-focused week for me. I talked a bit about my beta reading group. We met on Thursday, and then on Wednesday, in fact, I met with my writer salon, my local writer salon, with a short story affinity group we just started. We were workshopping each other's short stories, and I got some really nice positive feedback on this flash fiction thing that I submitted, so that was pretty cool. But I guess I am hoping and going to try to make the rest of my month maybe a little easier in terms of extracurricular activities. Work takes up enough time, and as I said, I have to get through my BookTube Prize books. I have less than a month left now before I have to, submit my ballot, so that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with a lot of my free time. Well, that and maybe my taxes perhaps this week. Once I get that done at least, hopefully I can, put, a big stressor behind me. And anyway, I will be back on this channel within the next week to do the Would You Read It challenge, where again, I will look at the BookTube Prize, this time at a ballot from years past, where I will be reading and discussing the first few paragraphs of the 6 books of an octafinals ballot. Excitingly, I can talk about those books because they're no longer in contention, and it's a fun way to revisit the prize, older parts of the prize, so stay tuned for that. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.